Chapter 6. The outside world was more compelling and unordinary rather than completely foreign to the twins. It wasn't like it had been something completely kept away, more of a privilege. There were memories of parks and playgrounds, and creaky swing sets, of tall oaks and games of tag, with other foster children who were young enough to simply accept them and their ways. Far before the monster appeared. And yes, Dipper could recall times when he had been kicked outside. An instance where he spilled water all over the table was clear in his mind, and he remembered being forced to stay outside on the porch amidst pouring rain and chilling temperatures, with a screaming Mabel pounding on the window until she too was tossed outside. Like some sad, cheesy commercial, but not with so much of a happy ending. But sometimes, the outside served as a sanctuary, held more things to see and distract, he guessed. Usually free reign was granted since no one really gave a damn about what the kids did. But with a forest as big as this one, telling them to explore was puzzling. Dipper would have eventually snuck Mabel back inside to safety if she hadn't suggested a game of tag. Dipper was a curious type, but he was more willing to observe from afar, whilst Mabel ran ahead and checked things out. But the pleading in her eyes when she insisted they race to the trees showed itself. Dipper saw no other choice but to oblige. Because when she was happy, he was happy. And that was just how things worked. If only she slowed herself down and remained wary like he was. Trusting the man shouldn't have become a two-day thing. He didn't even know everything about this guy and what he was capable of. But Mabel was becoming more stubborn. He could tell. He pondered over it all as he stood in front of a tall oak, fingers trailing along the bark. The smell of pine and grass floated around him, and there was a chirping of birds and some weird screech from a couple miles away. Mabel rolled around on the grass behind him, giggling and laughing and having the time of her life. Dipper smiled. She would be fine, so long as he kept a close eye on her. One sight of danger, or anyone dangerous, and he was towing her back to the attic, like it or not. Priorities. Priorities. He removed the dagger from his back jean pocket, thumb rubbing against the worn-down handle, the wood slowly molding to the form of his hand from all the years of use. Without a word, he carved a sigil into the trunk of the tree. Better safe than sorry. "Dipper! Dipper! Look at this pretty flower!" Suddenly, Mabel popped up from behind him, shoving a flower with creamy white petals into Dipper's face. Despite his musings, he couldn't help but giggle, his nose tickling from the onslaught, and he stepped back. "Ah! Mabel, that tickles!" He rubbed his nose, fighting the urge to do one of his embarrassing sneezes. "Why'd you gotta shove it in my face like that?" "'Cause I wanted you to smell it." Mabel inhaled, smiling at the fragrance before her grin faltered. "Reminds me of Mom's perfume." "Kinda." A somber mood almost took over, but the girl twin quickly recovered, tucking the plant behind her ear, the petals standing out from her silky brown hair that was littered with leaves and grass. "See? I told you we could trust Dan, Dipper. He didn't do anything, just like I told you." Dipper shoved his pocket knife back into his jeans, before leaning against a trunk. "Big whoop. He just wanted us out of the way. Look, you can trust him all you want, but I'm still remaining weary. You stay close, got it?" "Uh-oh." Mabel's voice turning and bending down to a small patch of clovers. "Someone's being bossy again." "It's to keep you safe, dum-dum." Dipper supported himself against the back of her head, and she waved her arms with a shriek, struggling to remain balanced. "Ah, Dipper, you're so heavy!" "Really? What if I did this?" The boy twin shoved himself against her, and the two landed in the clovers, collapsing into a heap and beginning to break into laughter again. Mabel tore up a handful of grass, sprinkling it over her twin in a fit of giggles. But Dipper didn't respond with the same attitude. He raised his head, feeling the odd sense of being watched, and his arm snaked over to wrap itself around Mabel's shoulders. "Mabel, Dipper, look!" Mabel interrupted, ducking her head low until her mouth was covered by a thick patch of clovers. Her voice was excited, but there was a tinge of nervousness creeping into her tone. Dipper frowned, but crouched beside her, trying to find what she had seen first, and instinctively placing himself in front of her. The two directed their attention to a figure hiding behind a tree. After a few seconds, the figure poked its head out, eyes wide and curious. It was a handyman, Dipper recognized, wearing a dark green t-shirt with a question mark logo and khaki pants. A brown cap tugged over his head. Large and almost perfect visual of a man-child. But being the handyman, he must be strong. Dipper kept himself where he was. The handyman seemed to notice that you had seen him, and snapped back to his place behind the tree. Dipper signaled with his hand, and both twins rose to their feet simultaneously. Boldly, they moved forward, before breaking apart and popping up on opposite sides of the tree. "Hi!" Mabel spoke cheerily, and the handyman yelled, clutching at his chest, and turning to the other side, only to find Dipper staring at him. He froze, looking at both kids before standing tall and directing a small little wave their way. "Hello, dude and Dcat," the handyman gasped out, reaching up to adjust his cap and studying the two from where he stood. "So, I guess I can't hide very well. Yes? No?" "It was adequate," Dipper stated, not bothering to hide the small snarl he had on his expression upon the man's appearance. He moved around, placing himself beside his sister. "Is there something wrong? Did Stan change his mind?"
"Oh no, he totally didn't,"
the handyman assured, before raising a hand to both children.
"I'm acting as supervisor, dude, so you don't, get kidnapped or something to that effect. Name suits."
He waited, but when he didn't receive a high five in response, he simply high-fived himself. "We don't need a..." Dipper began, but was instead silenced with an arm hooked around his shoulder, pressed against Mabel's side as a girl beamed at effectively shutting him up. "Hiya, Mr. Seuss! Do you want to play with us? We can play rolling in the grass, or chasing small mammals." "Mabel!" Dipper hissed, but his statement didn't seem to have an effect, as Seuss grinned at the approval.
"Sure, you little dudes have, like, a game of sorts, or do I need to place my input?"
"Mabel!" Dipper tried again, but the words froze on his lips as Mabel blurted, "Hide and seek!" She suggested it energetically, tugging at Dipper's arm to incite a response. "I love hide and seek! It's really fun!" "Mabel!" Dipper blinked at her in confusion, but she only smiled back at him. A smile that seemed slightly stale. But Seuss was oblivious as he grinned down at the two of them.
"Oh man, that's a great idea! Just don't try hiding in a log, because there's a high chance of getting stuck. Words of experience."
You wanna count?" Dipper offered, shooting a strained smile at the handyman. He didn't want to count and end up losing sight of Mabel, and the girl twin was already pulling at his arm in eagerness.
"Sure thing, Hambone."
Seuss turned his back on them, before covering his eyes and slowly beginning to count. Mabel immediately took off down the brush, leaves fluttering in her wake, and her movements as quick and silent as ever. Dipper stood in stunned thought, Seuss's deliberately unhurried counting ringing in his ears. He hadn't really considered where to hide. He slunk off towards the trees, deciding to let Mabel have the winning spot. Sunshine filtered through the trees, and as he crept over a log and crouched behind it, he vaguely kept an ear out for his twin. She was nearby, he knew, and knowing Stan's words, she didn't dare race too far into the forest. His hand swiped over a loose blade of grass inches from his face, as Seuss finally reached the number 20 and turned around. "I'm coming to get ya, you little bastards! Come on out!" Dipper stiffened, slapping his hand over his eyes and rubbing furiously, blinking hard as he peeked out from behind his log. The words echoed in his ears, heavy and deep and threatening. Jesus. It's Jesus, Dipper reminded himself, for hope of comfort. Just him. Unpleasant memories associated with this stupid game sucked. His heart pounding in his chest, he conceded. Getting to his feet, Zeus looked up and immediately shot him a look of confusion.
I'm supposed to find you.
I know, Dipper shrugged in response, kicking at the grass with his shoes, already dirtied from running around the mud. It's fine, I don't really want to play, but let's find Mabel. Mabel was fighting to silence her giggles, her small form well hidden within the scraggly branches and numerous leaves in a small bush. They'd never find her. They would never find the Queen of Bushes. Unless, of course, they seeked in the bushes. She hadn't played hide-and-seek in ages. Not truly, anyway. They were only snippets of memories of playing within school, and that was mostly because it was a class activity during a rainy recess. The pair of twins were often rejected in regards to their past, and friends to play with were rare. And hide-and-seek with only her twin never really was fun when they had those odd twin-seeking third instinct powers. She needed to give this game some kind of positive memory. That was a focus. Positives everywhere. Cover up the ugly moments. The horrid past that had made her heart nearly stop, with adrenaline racing and lots of tears. She felt her joyful mood begin to diminish at the thought. Come on out! I'll kill you, you little shits! Just you wait! She felt her hand suddenly snap closed, grasping for another hand that wasn't there. Oh, get a grip! Her brain scolded, and Mabel slowly let her head emerge from the bush, taking in the nature surrounding her. We're making this positive! We need to focus! Dipper's voice floated from somewhere within the trees, and Mabel frowned. Dipper always found her, like the brainiac he was pointing out clues and that freaky twin sense. She felt it sometimes too, knowing exactly where Dipper was without really needing directions in those rare moments when they were apart, and she knew he'd be coming in expecting her to be here. It was only a matter of time before they discovered the Queen of the Bushes. I need a different place, she mumbled, tapping her chin as she surveyed her surroundings. Her gaze fell onto the giant pine tree next to her, and she contemplated just how long it'd take for her to climb it. Not very long if she acted now. Pine trees weren't exactly a climbing tree, but she'd achieved the impossible before. Queen of the Bushes would soon upgrade to Queen of the Trees. Come back here, brat! The yell echoed in her ears, and it was almost as if the world grayed out around her. She stiffened, glancing behind her and almost feeling like she could see a hulking shadow slinking towards her. Suddenly, a cold chill swept over her. A numbing fear took hold of her limbs before adrenaline took over and told her to move. Without thinking, she leapt forward, hugging the trunk of the tree and hoisting herself up the branches closest to the ground. She shakily reached up, fighting for a handhold, her small weight enough to keep her up. Soon, she was steadily climbing, rising higher and higher with as little noise as she could manage. You think you can run away? This is my house, my rules. I know this place. Stop being a coward! The voice was directly in her ear. She climbed higher, trying to avoid its owner, fear projecting her forwards as she scaled branch by branch. Her heart thudded in her ears, blocking out every other sound. She didn't notice Dipper's calls. You're useless, you know that? Hiding away like some scared little mouse. How many times I gotta toughen you two up? And you leave your brother behind. You're a fucking coward. Nothing but a fucking... Stop! She screeched, squeezing her eyes shut, feeling the tears almost trickling past the corners. A branch nagged on her sweater and she jumped, spinning around as if to face an attacker. A loud crack resonated around her and the branch she was gripping onto fell away, balance became non-existent, and as she finally returned to the present, she barely scrambled for purchase, and only succeeded in scraping against rough bark. Her hand stung as she grabbed helplessly. Dip! Without any warning, the branch under her foot gave way, and she found herself plummeting through the foliage, straight through to the ground. Mabel, where are you? Dipper swiftly maneuvered his way around the trees and bushes, shoes crunching against the leaves, and rocks uplittered the path. Light filtered through the trees, a squirrel skittering past now and then. Seuss trailed after the boy, taking time to peek through bushes and look within the occasional hollow log.
Man, she's hiding really well,
Seuss stated, sounding minimally impressed. Dipper offered a small nod in return as he peered behind a nearby tree trunk. Yeah, she's like that. It's enough to be regarded as a talent. Yeah, and I taught her that. Dipper sighed as he kept walking, slowing his steps as he tried to feel for Mabel's presence. He was beginning to feel anxious, his movements more harried. Of course, Mabel was only hiding. That was the point of the game after all. But whenever she was out of sight and he wasn't aware of her whereabouts, it just naturally caused the boy twin to worry. A deep dread bubbled up in his chest, and there was a nagging voice in the back of his head. He hated this damn game. He hated it, and he hated that he let her decide. She was trying too hard, going too fast in trying to make the past become nothing but a forgotten memory, and it just wasn't that easy. It wasn't easy to trust, but she was Mabel, naturally trusting, naturally loving, and their past didn't succeed in dulling it completely. It was a gift, and a curse. A sudden sense of worriment overcame the young twin, and he paused, almost wanting to scrawl a sigil somewhere, here too for good measure. But he never got to, as a loud and piercing cry of "Dipper!" sliced through the air. There was a loud crack and snap, and the sound of leaves being ripped apart, the noises echoing throughout the forest, without warning. Mabel plummeted to the ground from the tree right next to her brother, landing on the ground with a thump that was hardly dulled by the grass. She laid still, spread out, and unmoving. Mabel! Dipper gasped as Seuss cried out, stumbling backwards and looking towards the tree she had fallen from. Oh my God! Oh God! Mabel! He was by her side within a second, diving to his knees and quickly turning her head over. Swift and practiced motions, a simple routine he'd learned over the years. Taking care of her was nothing new, but the rising paralyzing panic that swelled in his chest was something he never got used to. Mabel's eyes were shut, her face pale and nothing. Not even a twitch of a finger at Dipper's voice, which never meant anything good. Her sweater was covered in twigs and leaves, hair tangled with pine needles and sticks, and Dipper shakily gathered her into his arms. He studied her forehead, scrutinizing the cut slashed across her forehead. Blood slowly trickled down her face, following the curve of her cheek. This wasn't the worst shape he'd seen her in. Not even close. But for it to happen so suddenly was far too jarring. The male twin snatched the flower tangled within her hair, yanking it out and casting it aside as he brushed the brown locks from her face. He felt around her neck, only feeling a small sense of relief when there wasn't a sign of a break. Mabel! Wake up! Mabel! He swallowed hard, raising his head to find the Seuss guy was gone. Whatever. He could handle not having a bumbling handyman around. He could probably do something. He held his twin tighter as he studied the trees around him. It was almost like the wind had halted, and a nagging voice rose within his head as he felt himself begin to tremble. Dream. It was probably a really horrible dream. A nightmare. Yeah, it had to be. Mabel, talk to me. Dipper's tone took on a familiar soothing lilt, commonly used whenever she was hurt like this. He's not gonna touch you again, okay? You're gonna be fine. You're gonna be fine. You didn't do anything wrong. It was all me. All me. Sorry. Wind finally rustled through the trees, and it was almost like the branches were beginning to morph, extending and curling, snaking down to snatch Mabel away for good. Dipper gasped as the world began to take on a yellow tint, a lemon-like color tainting everything in sight. Eyes everywhere. The monster. He was coming. He was back. But how could he? Crap.
Kid!
Dipper jumped, clutching Mabel tighter as the color fell back in a single blink. The tree suddenly bounding back to normal form. A man. The man loomed over him, with the red-headed teenager and the Seuss guy hanging back. When had they arrived? Dipper flinched as Stan knelt down, assessing Mabel where he stood, traces of worry over his aged features. He was breathing heavily, as if he had sprinted the whole distance, and a single hand hovered over as if urging to grab Mabel from the boy. The boy twin followed the man's gaze down to Mabel's still form, easing her into a more comfortable position within his hold. The blood was still flowing, running down the side of her face and seeping into the collar of her sweater, stark red contrasting with the soft pink of the fabric. He wondered if she was still hurting, even if she was unconscious. She never admitted it when he asked. Mabel, you're gonna be fine, you hear me? The boy directed icily. You're gonna be okay. I can fix this. I can... It almost felt like it had been too damn long since he'd had to deal with this. Hey, we got this. Stan threw aside his cane, bending forward a bit and reaching his arms out. Here, Dipper, let me see. No! Dipper tore her away, his yell loud and sharp as he tried to turn his back on the man and keep Mabel still as possible, only half succeeding in doing both things simultaneously. No! She's mine! Don't touch her! Kid, I need to see her, Stan insisted urgently. She's hurt. I can help her. No, you can't! Dipper suddenly tried to scramble to his feet, struggling to hold Mabel in his arms, but his strength failed him and he fell back to his knees. I don't know what you'll do. I don't know you. Only I ever take care of Mabel. Kid, please. You need to hand her over. No! Dipper buried his face against her sweater sleeve, his form shaking at the thought of anyone but him taking his sister. No, he couldn't trust them. He couldn't. She's my sister. You will hurt her. You will hurt her! A fiery aura surrounded the kid, fear transforming into rage. Whoa! Wendy suddenly stumbled back as a flower near her feet burst into flames. A blue, tinted fire that slowly faded into a normal color of flaming orange-yellow. She stamped on it with her boot, extinguishing it immediately. What the hell? Dipper, give me your sister, Stan demanded, as gently as he could as the boy began to scoot away, hitting his back against a tree. I'm gonna help her, kid. I ain't gonna hurt her, but I need to help her. You holding her like that isn't making it any better. She's mine! My sister! Dipper hiccuped, tears forming in the corners of his eyes. Please, sir, it was all an accident. I'm sorry. Punish me instead. I made her go up that tree. Dipper. No, I did. I told her to. Just don't hurt her. Stan furrowed his brow and snapped towards his gawking workers. Could really use some help here. Wendy began to creep forward as Stan faced the young twin. Dipper, it's okay. Come on, kid. You gotta trust me. One day we're gonna have to trust him. He's gonna be the only thing we've got. Come on, Dipper. Stan held out his arms invitingly, and Dipper peered down at his sister once more. Wendy rushed forwards before either could say any more, grabbing the undersides of his arms and effectively picking him up. Mabel rolled to the floor, and a howl of rage erupted from her brother as he thrashed in the teen's arms and called for his sister. Stan took no time and scooped Mabel up and hurried back to the shack, Seuss following closely after as Wendy brought herself down to tackle and pin the boy to the floor. Hurry, Seuss! Stan snapped as he rushed through the woods, cradling the girl twin in his arms.